The Young and the Restless spoilers. In Genoa City, where power and passion collide in equal measure, the quiet facades of elegant boardrooms and sprawling estates can never fully contain the chaos brewing underneath. The storm this time did not come from a corporate merger or a family feud over shares in Newman or Abbott Enterprises, but from something far darker, an obsession born of jealousy and sharpened by personal ambition. Victoria, who had spent her life navigating ruthless business wars and family betrayals, had long ago developed the instinct to sense when danger was near. And her instinct screamed louder than ever when she saw the way Audra's eyes lingered on Claire and Kyle. To the outside world, Audra carried herself as the ambitious and intelligent woman who had carved her path with cunning and sharp intellect. But to Victoria, who had seen countless manipulative personalities over the years, there was something different here, something raw, destructive, and unhinged. It was not love that guided Audra's steps, but a hunger to control, to dominate, to prove herself superior. And if Kyle was at the center of this storm, then Clara was the one standing in her way. Victoria's understanding of the situation was brutal and simple. Audra didn't want Kyle out of any real affection. Her attraction was a mask, a weapon, another means of getting what she wanted. What she craved was the triumph of tearing something away from someone else, of bending a man to her will not because she loved him, but because possessing him was proof of her dominance. Victoria saw through her, and in that clarity, she felt both fury and dread. Fury, because the cycle of destruction Audra perpetuated threatened to once again destabilize the fragile balance of lives already shaken by secrets. Dread, because she knew the lengths Audra would go to get her way. Audra was reckless, bold, and when desperation set in, she was the kind of woman who would not hesitate to cross lines that others would never imagine. Victoria resolved that she could no longer watch passively. She had to know what Audra was planning, what her true limits were, and she had to stay close enough to intercept whatever madness might come next. So she followed quietly, keeping Audra in her sight, watching her movements, her words, and her escalating behavior. And all the while, Claire, blissfully unaware of the darkness circling her, moved forward with her life, clinging to Kyle, believing that their relationship was strong enough to withstand jealous eyes. But innocence has never been a shield in Genoa City, and naivety often becomes the most dangerous blindfold. It happened one night when the silence of the road betrayed no sign of what was to come. Claire was driving home, the weight of the day pressing down on her, but still comforted by the thought of Kyle's love. The forest road was dimly lit, tree shadows dancing across the pavement under the moonlight. When a sudden obstruction appeared, something lying across the road, she instinctively slowed down and pulled over. Stepping out, she realized too late that this was no accident, no fallen branch or random obstacle. It was deliberate, carefully placed, meant to lure her out of the safety of her car and into the darkened woods where the night seemed to hold its breath. At that same moment, Victoria's suspicions were confirmed. From the cover of the trees, Audra emerged, silent and deliberate, her hand gripping the cold metal of a gun. The look in her eyes was not of hesitation but of certainty. This was not a bluff, not an empty threat. She intended to kill Claire right there, in the forest where no one could hear, where her death would be written off as a tragic accident or a senseless crime. Audra's mind was set, and the ruthless determination radiating from her made it clear that nothing short of blood would satisfy her twisted sense of victory. Victoria's rage burned hotter than ever, but she was not reckless like Audra. She had anticipated the moment, prepared herself for it. She had brought a weapon, not because she wanted to use it, but because she knew Audra was the kind of woman who forced others into choices no one should ever have to make. As Audra raised her gun toward Claire, Victoria moved quickly, her breath steady, her eyes unblinking, and in the instant that Audra's finger began to tighten on the trigger, Victoria fired. The shot rang out, echoing through the trees, and Audra fell, the arrogance and hatred draining from her face as her body collapsed onto the cold earth. But the chaos did not end there. The bullet Victoria had fired had not been alone in its path of destruction. Claire, caught in the chaos, was struck, the pain searing as she collapsed to the ground. Victoria's triumph was hollow, replaced by horror as she rushed to Claire's side. The forest that moments ago had been tense with the threat of violence now seemed to scream with the urgency of survival. Claire's blood stained the dirt, her breath shallow, her eyes wide with shock and fear. Victoria's heart pounded as she pressed her hands against the wound, her mind racing between guilt, desperation, and determination. Was this justice, or had she simply traded one tragedy for another? Audra lay dead, her reign of manipulation cut short, but Claire, innocent and undeserving of the nightmare, now teetered on the edge of life and death. Victoria knew that if she lost Claire, no explanation, no reasoning, no justification would absolve her. Kyle would never forgive her, the family would shatter, and Victoria herself would carry the burden of that night forever. In that instant, she understood the cruel irony of it all. In her attempt to protect, she had become the very thing she had sworn to prevent, an agent of pain, a bringer of destruction. The night stretched endlessly as Victoria tried to save Claire, her mind spinning with the consequences that would inevitably follow. Would Claire survive long enough for help to arrive? Would the truth of that night ever be known, or would it become twisted in the retellings, another layer of betrayal in the endless saga of Genoa City's tangled lives? Nothing was certain, except that the world they all lived in would never be the same again. Victoria's fury did not subside even after the forest was filled with the ringing echoes of gunfire. Standing over Audra's body, she knew that this was only the beginning of a reckoning. Her hands still trembled, not from fear, but from the surge of adrenaline and the brutal clarity of her conviction. Audra had to die, for Claire's future, for Kyle's sanity, for the fragile threads of love and loyalty that were constantly under siege in Genoa City. Victoria had lived long enough to know that some enemies could not be contained, that some threats did not simply vanish with exile or banishment. Audra was not the kind of woman who would fade away quietly. She was the kind of poison that infected every corner of a life until it was destroyed from within. To remove her from Nice, to erase her presence completely, was not only a mission Victoria had undertaken, it was the only way forward. But there was no time to dwell. As Victoria crouched by Claire, trying to stem the bleeding, headlights cut through the trees and a car screeched to a halt. Kyle, his face pale and stricken with horror, sprinted to them, his hands reaching desperately for Claire. The anguish in his voice tore through the night as he lifted her carefully, cradling her as though she might shatter. For Kyle, this was a nightmare on repeat, a grotesque cycle of betrayal and danger that seemed determined to haunt every woman he loved. His heart raged with the same question that had echoed for years. Why must happiness always be so fragile? Why must darkness always stalk every corner of his love life? There was no answer, only the relentless reality that once again he was carrying the woman he adored into the arms of fate, and certain if she would live long enough to see another sunrise. At the hospital, the sterile smell of disinfectant and the harsh glare of fluorescent lights did nothing to ease the weight crushing Kyle's chest. Claire was rushed into surgery, her blood staining his shirt, his mind replaying every moment in agonizing detail. And when the doors closed behind her, cutting him off, Kyle's grief became rage. He turned toward the room, his voice firm, breaking through the tension with a declaration that silenced everyone present. He had never loved Audra, never given her his heart, and he never would. Whatever illusions she had spun, whatever manipulations she had crafted, they were meaningless. His love, his devotion, his future all belonged to Claire. In that moment, there was no ambiguity, no hesitation. Audra had been nothing but a shadow, and Claire was his light. Nate and Holden arrived in the chaos, each carrying their own heavy hearts. For Nate, Claire represented innocence, a soul worth protecting, someone who deserved better than to be caught in the crossfire of Genoa City's endless rivalries. To see her broken and bloodied on an operating table ignited a protective rage inside him that he could barely contain. Holden, too, was shaken, his quiet strength rattled by the sight of women he respected and cared for being dragged into another bloody chapter of betrayal and madness. For both men, this was not just about rivalry, not about business, not about the games that families in Genoa City so often played. It was personal, visceral, a reminder that beneath the wealth and glamour, they were all still human, and humans bled. Victoria stood apart from them, her expression unreadable, though her mind churned with fire. She had made her choice, and she would not regret it. Audra's death was not only necessary, it was inevitable. If she had lived, she would have continued to manipulate, to threaten, to poison the happiness of those around her. Yet the irony was unbearable. By saving Claire, she had also wounded her, leaving scars both physical and emotional that no one could predict. And Victoria knew that when Carl looked at her now, when Nate and Holden questioned her motives, when the whispers of police and family members began to circle, the truth of that night would not be clean. It would be tainted with suspicion, with accusations, with the possibility that she had crossed too far into the abyss. But Victoria's resolve hardened. If she had to carry this burden, she would. She had eliminated a threat, and she would not let Claire's suffering be in vain. She would stand by her, protect her, shield her from whatever fallout might come. She had spent her entire life making ruthless decisions in boardrooms. Now she had made one with a gun, and the line between savior and executioner blurred forever. For her, the only question that remained was not whether she had done the right thing, but whether Claire and Carl would live long enough to see the future she had tried to secure.